Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. So glad you've joined us from wherever you are all over the world. We welcome you. So many of you are finding us at goodlifetelevision.org, and we welcome you. All of these wonderful guests, you can find them all. I think we're at about 120 wonderful people, all walks of life, business people, entrepreneurs, public servants, overcomers, young people. It's been a great group, and you can find all the full form, the long form interviews there. You can also find what we call power clips, where we kind of break those interviews up into some of the great moments. We're also on all the social media platforms, and we're just delighted that you're here. We're here to talk about the good stuff. You can find a lot of the other stuff other places. We're here to talk about the good stuff. That doesn't mean that suffering doesn't exist or problems don't happen. We are on planet Earth after all, but we're here to talk about the good stuff, whatever is noble and excellent and praiseworthy. So we're just so glad you're a part. I'm really excited about my guests today, at least one of them. Sorry, John.
I'm excited Reed's here too.
At least 50% of my guests, I'm really, two great guys. Reed Spangler and John Davies are with me. You've seen John on the program previously. We had him on. We talked about leadership and culture. It was check out that interview if you haven't actually. But we're here today to talk with these two gentlemen about here in Santa Barbara, California, where we're sitting. The community prayer breakfast that has happened every year except last year for 63 years. 1958 it was founded. It's a phenomenal event, and it's happening September 30th here in Santa Barbara, California at the Hilton at 7:30 in the morning. So we want to talk about that. We want to talk about the breakfast itself, but I want to start with a little bit about the history. Reed, you've been around this a long time, I think 40 years or so.
Yes.
But talk about kind of the early involvement, and Jimmy Carter was here, and
absolutely, yes.
Talk a little bit about the history.
The Santa Barbara Community Prayer Breakfast is patterned after the National Prayer Breakfast, and sometime in the late 50s, the mayor of Santa Barbara went back to the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C., and he came back so excited that he called a friend, a fellow named Bill Alexander, and said, "Bill, can you put something like the National Prayer Breakfast together here in Santa Barbara?" And so Bill went to the Christian Businessmen's Committee and said, "Hey guys, we got a project here," and they started it in 1958 and have been having annual prayer breakfasts ever since. We've had speakers that range from Jimmy Carter, who came out here just I think a year or two before he was elected president.
Wow.
We've had CEOs, and we've had Olympians, gold medal Olympians as speakers. We've had teachers from a local school. We've had coaches. We just had a great cross-section of speakers.
Wow.
But the main purpose of the event is really to get the Santa Barbara community together to pray for our community, for our state, for our nation and our world, and for the leaders.
Yes.
So that's the primary reason for our existence. And then we always invite a speaker to come and share just part of their spiritual journey and some of the lessons they've learned. And then we close the meeting generally with a prayer that includes an invitation to each and every person in the audience to take a step closer to God in their own spiritual journey.
So it's all, it can be any denomination background. Whoever's watching this, they're welcome.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
Yes.
That's wonderful. And the speaker this year I've heard of, John Davies.
Yes.
John Davies is the president and CEO of Davies Public Affairs and various other entities. And John's been around a long time in this community. And John, you're on tap this year.
I am.
Give us a little sneak peek into what you're what your thoughts are.
Well, it's always an incredible honor, but it also is a little bit scary, to be up front and do something like that. And as Reed asked me, I think I told him so. Everyone else said no, and I've been to the National Prayer Breakfast a few times and watched a lot of them, so that's even more intimidating. So my thought is, this is the community prayer breakfast, and I want to talk about prayer. And the thought for me is I'm humbled by the prayer of my wife. She's a prayer warrior. And Dean, I know if I asked your wife or asked you who's the prayer warrior in your family, and we know who it is. And so I'm motivated to increase prayer in my life and be as much of a prayer warrior as my wife is and many others. And I want to share that motivation with others.
Yes. I was reading this morning and just thinking about this, and we were talking about this a little bit off air, but about prayer. And I once worked for an organization. There's a pastor named John Davies. He wrote this book called Why Pray?
Yeah.
And he says this. It says, prayer is a love relationship with God in which we present our needs and then live in exciting, trust-filled wonder and anticipation of the unexpected ways that God will work. And we were talking about this before. Sometimes prayer can get stale, or I think, okay, and maybe it's the thought that, well, I should be praying more, I should, or I need. Right. But this trust-filled prayer life that, and Reed, when we were talking about this earlier, I could see it all over your face when we were talking about just a fresh, trust-filled prayer life is so wonderful.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
I mean, it's the best way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. The more you pray, the more you see answers, and the more you see answers, the more you want to pray, and it's just, it's just so exciting when you lean into that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's I've come to think that maybe the most wonderful thing you can say to another person, if you mean it, which I'm assuming you do, is I'll pray for you. And that can become a cliche, but I mean, imagine.
It's become a cliche, but it's also become an uncliche. If you notice that people that are afraid to be identified as Christians now say, I'll keep you in my heart. Right. I'll send you good thoughts. And I want you praying for me.
That's a great point.
My wife's brother-in-law has just been diagnosed with a non-terminal but a very painful, they actually call the disease the suicide disease. It is so painful. And so we're praying for him. And I asked them if they've gone to the elders of their church and asked for prayer. And they're like, well, I don't know. We've been watching online. And so I said, can I? So I emailed the elders in their church, a huge church outside of Houston called Cowboy Church, and got an incredible reply and phone call from one of the leaders of the church. And they're going by the house with a group of their elders and pastors, and they're going to anoint and they're going to pray over him for healing. And the thing is I was talking to the woman on the phone about it. I go, it's always amazing that when we do these type of prayers, and then we're shocked that it happens. That right. Prayer works.
Yes.
And it's always like, it works so often that it's pretty shocking.
Yes,
that we don't expect it to happen.
Yeah. I've been stunned in my life at some of the specific answers, or non-answers, if you will, where it was like, okay, he sees the whole picture, but just the honor of saying, of praying for another person, of saying, I've got a meeting with the creator of the universe this afternoon, and I'd like to bring you up. I'd like to talk. Thank you. I mean, talk about a big deal.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
a really big deal, and it's powerful. So in Acts 12, in verse 5, there is an incredibly powerful word, and the word is "but." And the verse reads, Peter was therefore kept in prison, but constant prayer was offered to God for him by the church. you think about the moment. It's a desperate moment. It looks though Peter's going to die. It looks as though the fledgling church is going to end. But that it's all coming to an end. And, so it's a model how to pray.
Yeah.
It was a fervent prayer.
Yes.
It was a focused prayer. It was an earnest prayer.
Yes.
And it was a family prayer. And you think about what happened. We know what happened.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's what we're looking for, I think, in our lives, is that type of prayer.
Yes.
That type of powerful prayer. And, when Jesus modeled prayer with the Lord's Prayer and when he prayed in the garden, the prayers weren't these grandiose, beautiful, thoughtful prayers. They were a child's prayer. And very childlike.
Yeah.
And very, I mean, the prayer in the garden was 27 words. Think about that. One of the most powerful
really
prayers. Yeah.
Yeah. And the power of corporate prayer. Talk about that, because here we are talking about a community prayer gathering, ecumenical kind of. I mean, whatever background you are, denomination, no faith at all, everybody's welcome. What's the power? Because I think it's a unifying thing in a community to gather. Would you say?
I agree, absolutely. I think all we need to do is look up and look around Santa Barbara and know that God has blessed this community. And I'm convinced that 62 years of praying have had a result. And I can't point to a specific, we were going this way and all of a sudden things went the right direction.
Right.
It's hard to pin that down, but I know there's a power in corporate prayer, and Jesus said that where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I'll be there.
Right.
I am there.
See, he wants us together.
Yeah, he does.
Because he could have just said, pray and I'll be there, which he is.
Well,
but he specifically said 2 or 3.
Yeah. I mean, he wants a relationship.
Yeah.
And you can't have a relationship unless you're talking. And
I found that.
Yeah. We've heard reports, but it's amazing that that's what it is.
Yeah.
God wants a relationship with us. He wants us to do good things. He wants us to be out there producing fruit in his name for his glory. Yeah. I mean, the story is pretty simple, and we start by praying for one another.
Yes.
I mean, it's like we take our dreams and our wishes and our desires, and we pray to him. And if they're the right plan, he'll honor them.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or in his timing, it'll be better.
Exactly.
You've mentioned you've walked with him a long time, and I'm sure you've seen that over time, that, man, he knew the whole picture.
He knew the whole picture.
I was here, he was here. What I wanted at the time didn't exactly happen, but man, am I glad.
Absolutely.
Isn't that amazing?
Oh, it is amazing. Early on, I said, God, show me the plan, and I'm sure that with your brains and my brawn, we can accomplish anything. And he never did show me the plan like that.
Right.
Yeah. But he showed me that if I get up every day and meet with him and talk with him, he'll direct my steps that day.
Yeah.
And
So
that's been great.
Yeah, so good. He can really be trusted.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a truth.
Yeah.
And such a simple truth when you think about it.
Yeah.
And we serve and love a God who loves us. He's a God of love. I mean, the 2 greatest commandments when he was asked, he basically said, please love me back. Yeah. Love me with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love one another. I mean, that's his deal. So I just that realization always blows me away. Yeah. And just the idea. I remember as a kid growing up in this little church in upstate New York, and a Catholic church, and the crucifix was in the front of the church. As a kid, you're looking up, and it's like, well, that's pretty gruesome. There, as you see the nails, they have like red blood on there. And I kept thinking, if he's God, why didn't he just get off there? He can pop those nails off.
Right.
Why can't he just pop the nails off?
Yeah.
And as I grew in my faith, and the realization hits me is that the nails didn't keep him on the cross. It was his love for us.
Yeah.
That's what kept him on the cross. Which, but as a kid, it's like, wait a minute. If this guy's God, how come what happened to him when he got to the cross and they put the nails in? Did he lose being God?
Yeah.
No, that's not why he stayed there.
Right. Oh, that's so good, John. So good. Yeah, and I had a guest here a few weeks ago. He goes, like you, he's walked with God for a long time, and I asked him, what is it you like about God? And I was expecting some, kind of profound theological statement or something. He says, I like that he likes me. He doesn't just love it, like, because sometimes I think, well, what prayer, is he up there going, is Wilson again? Can we figure this out at some point? Is Wilson again?
This is the 5th time you've asked me about that.
Right.
I've told you 5 times.
Right. I said
go do
times.
what I said.
Right. Yes. But his posture towards us is he doesn't just love us. He likes us. Like he made me. Like he did it. He made you. I mean, it's what a wonderful
Tim
God.
Keller has this great quote, and I'm going to blow it because I haven't thought about it in a while, but it's about being known and loved.
Yes.
And so it's one of our
fear is being known and not loved.
Right, but his deal is that to be loved but not known is really nice, but it's not fulfilling.
Yeah.
To be known and not loved is our greatest fear.
Yes.
But to be 100% known and 100% loved is the greatest joy you can have. Yeah. And that's a relationship we have with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
That he knows us 100%. He knows everything that no one else knows about us, and he still loves us. Yeah. And he is patient and polite and waits on us. He waits for us.
Yeah. Yeah. He's bringing the noise. I didn't know he had it in him.
Yeah.
You better save some of this.
Okay, I'm done.
You're the keynote,
Yeah.
No.
How many minutes do I have?
No, you just get
6 minutes. Well, I don't know if you guys ever watched. One of my favorite prayer breakfasts, and just blew me away, was Bono at the National Prayer Breakfast.
Oh my gosh.
And so I watched it, and I wish I could have gone to that one. I saw James Baker, who was the Secretary of State, James Baker, and I saw Billy Graham at the National Prayer Breakfast. So 2 amazing people to be there. And so I watched Bono, and Bono started off, he goes, so I don't know why I'm here. He goes, it's like this is a place for a man of the cloth. And unless the cloth is leather, there's no reason for me to be here. And what he gave that day was so powerful. It was basically that just because of the longitude and latitude of where you were born should not define your life. And we who were born in more gifted longitude and latitude need to help those who were born in others. I mean, and that speech.
You remembered it.
Oh, it's a book. It was published as a book. Oh, really? Very, very powerful.
Wow.
And then obviously Eric Matexas and Ben Carson, and you keep going through the group.
Yeah.
So I mean, if people are looking for it, looking to find some of those National Prayer Breakfasts, it's a great thing to look at.
Yeah, you can YouTube it.
Yeah.
National Prayer Breakfast on YouTube. You can find. They go back 63 years. My dad's sitting over here. He took me. I remember. Somehow through security, I made it through with that little camera. Do you remember? Yeah. Ronald Reagan was president. I stood up. I'm like 10. I stood up to take a picture. I don't think you could do that anymore. But I'll never forget that. But we went to those National Prayer Breakfasts. Yeah. It was meaningful. And
there's a lot of big hair there. I'm just saying.
A lot of big hair.
Yeah, because my tickets were always way in the back. And there was a lot of Texas hair there.
Texas, right.
You had to dodge your chair around a room to try to find a place
where you could see.
Where you get over the big hair.
So here is an opportunity to unite. Here's an opportunity to pray. Here's an opportunity to be together in fellowship, and in this COVID era where we haven't done much of that. It's September 30th. We're talking about the Community Prayer Breakfast here in Santa Barbara, California. September 30th at the Hilton, 7:30 a.m. John Davies is the keynote, and I'm with Reed, Spangler, and John, and I'm excited.
Yeah, so am I.
Yeah. So, any other details I'm leaving out?
Well, if anybody is interested in becoming a sponsor,
yes,
they can go to santabarbaraprayerbreakfast.org. We've got the website there. It'll give details on how to become a sponsor, how to purchase a table of 10,
yes,
10 seats that is, and invite your friends. this is an opportunity for the whole community to come together and pray to address, you know, serious problems that we're facing, and just ask for, you know, reconciliation and help and health and just whatever we need. And so check out the Santa Barbara Prayer Breakfast.org.
And the Christian Businessmen's group is involved in the planning of this. We wanted to mention that. But yeah, I'd encourage you to look at sponsorship opportunities, tickets, bring a friend. Again, this is apolitical, all religious, you know, all denominational, religious background, no faith at all, whatever it is. It'll be an uplifting, wonderful time. I can tell you.
And if you can't afford a ticket,
yeah,
let us know that also, and we'll get you there.
Yes. If you can't afford a ticket, let this group know, and we'll be talking about this. We'll be pushing these clips out on Good Life TV and hoping getting the word out. So, Thank you for your years of involvement with this, and John, we'll be praying for you.
Thank you
as you bring the word.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, it'll be wonderful. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
I feel a bit caught in between at times because, like I've told my children for years, when God calls you to be a bridge, you have to expect that you're going to get stepped on every now and then.
Likely that a traumatized person will cause more trauma. It's also true that a cherished person will be able to find their way to the joy there is in cherishing themselves and others.
The notion of justice and fairness just always appealed to me. Justice was my calling, not just a career. Pursuing justice for the poor and less privileged has been like the greatest adventure of my life.
Find a mentor, find a coach, because in the coach there is the man who's climbed the mountain, you just begin, or summited the mountain, you're just beginning to climb. It's just wisdom.
I just want people to become friends with the author so that they can have that perspective on life and realize that they were made on purpose, for a purpose, and they're on the stage of the world right now to play an important role.
If you want something, you have to really articulate what it is. You have to say it out loud, and then you have to be willing to receive that too, and be willing to feel that you're worthy of receiving that.
Partisan legislatures in Congress are meant to debate,
right?
To be passionate about your differences, different
right.
points of views,
right?
But they're not supposed to be such that you hate one another or that you demagogue one another.
You know, and that's the great thing about it, because nobody's better than anybody else. We all got the moment of today, of right now, to be the best person that we can be, and most importantly, you know, take the gift that we've been given and give it away to other people, because I know I can't keep it unless I give it away.
I guess just to build knowledge and awareness of it, just so people can have a better understanding of what it is. You know, I think having those conversations builds empathy, and with empathy comes solidarity.
When I see positive things happen in the world, when I see stories that young kids, something fantastic happens to them, those are the good things in life, and when you can do things like that, that you can help someone maybe achieve some of their goals in life.
This is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. Exciting show today. Coach John Moore, the basketball coach for the last 27 years, recently retired at Westmont College, is with us. John's just a wonderful man. Has lived a great life, has some great insights. So stay tuned. You're not going to want to miss it. John Moore on Good Life, coming up next. Hi, this is Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I have a special guest today. Coach John Moore is with me. Coach Moore has been at Westmont College for 26 years, 27 years. Has just left the head coaching position, but he's staying on at the college as a professor and associate athletic director. He's been a friend of mine. In fact, we got to Westmont in a way in the same year, in 1993. That's when I arrived. Yeah. Little fanfare. When you came back to be the head coach at your alma mater after Fresno Pacific and so forth. So I feel like a little connection.
Yeah, we graduated together.
right. You stayed a little longer
Took me
than
a
I
little
did.
longer to graduate.
Right. Coach Moore had over 32 years as a head coach. He had 637 wins. He was the National Coach of the Year this year for the NAI, which I believe is the first time that's ever happened in Westmont history. The team was top ranked this year, didn't get to have a tournament because of COVID-19. So bizarre, kind of crazy circumstances to end on. And maybe we'll start there. How did you handle that with the team?
Well, I'm on this NABC board
Yep,
of directors,
right.
and I'm the only NAI coach on there. And the day it was announced, we had a board call at 8 o'clock in the morning. And Mike Bray, the Notre Dame coach, who's the president of the NABC board this year, just went off. He said, hey, I'm going to my shoot around. And he was, Notre Dame's in the Big East. And he said, hey, hope the board call goes well, but I'm going to my shoot around, as though the tournament was still on. And we talked about it. We got to the end of the call, our call, and it seemed like full speed ahead. An hour and a half later, I get an email from the president of the NAI, Jim Carr, saying the tournament has been canceled. My longest walk ever up to Westmont. We live on Chelham Way. It's a walk up to the college. And when I got there, Jeff Azen had already rallied the troops. And so Coach Boucher, Coach Goodrow, Jeff, and the whole team was there. And times have changed, Dean. They all already knew. So you can imagine what social media
right.
can do
right.
for you. And
right.
I thought I was going to surprise them, but there was no surprise to be had, because you could tell that
they knew
the puffy cheeks and the teary-eyed. And so we sat in the room and we cried and said it can't be so. And then we went out that afternoon and we had a practice.
Really?
We decided to have a practice anyway. And we had a really enjoyable time together. And that was my last practice at Westmont College. And it was their last practice for this past year, at least. And so it was nostalgic and sad at the same time.
Wow. Yeah. And you were the coach of the year, and you were heading into the tournament as a 2-seed?
We were.
Oh. Yeah, that's a tough one.
And it was a team that we were finally completely healthy. Everybody was back. We had practiced for about a week with everybody in tow, and it felt like we were finally back to where we had been earlier in the year, with everybody healthy again. And so we liked our chances. We really liked our chances. And I don't say that very often, but we did like our chances.
Yeah. Well, God is still good.
Still good.
Yeah, still good. But that's got to be a huge disappointment.
Yep.
You got to Westmont. You were a non-believer. You came for 2 years. Were you at Cypress? Chapman?
At Cypress College.
Okay.
Yep.
And you transferred in, recruited by Chet Kammerer. And you talked about you and Chet Kammerer one time took a drive to Angel Stadium to watch a game and hang out with a recruit. And on the drive, he said, if I gave you a book called Mere Christianity, would you read it? And you said that book's been with you since.
Yeah.
Talk about what happened with your faith journey at Westmont, after Westmont, and kind of that journey for you.
Yeah. Well, here's a little caveat. He said, hey, if I give you a book, will you read it? And I said, sure.
Before he gave you the title?
And then he said, it was Mere Christianity. And I was not a believer at the time. But my respect for Chet, my respect for my teammates, encouraged me to do that. So I came into Westmont a non-believer, and people prayed me into the kingdom. People like Chet Kammerer, Mark Miller, whose 3 sons I've had the privilege to coach. One of them works with your brother, Johnny Miller does. And so I read that book more out of respect for Chet than interest in the topic. And that changed my life. In fact, I have it. I wake up every morning and I read Proverbs, and I read, right now I'm in Matthew, and I have Mere Christianity right there. Those are my 3 staples, with my bran flakes and my oatmeal flakes. Yeah.
Coffee? No coffee?
I'm not a coffee drinker. No. In fact, I've got 3 people in the house who are coffee drinkers, and I'd be competing for their coffee if I was a coffee drinker. But I have no interest in coffee at all. Never have. Love the smell, hate the taste. Yeah. But that was my faith journey. It began right about that time. Came to faith right after my senior year at Westmont, and then I wanted to come back more than anything to be able to recruit people who were like me, people without faith, or people struggling in their faith, or people who have deep faith. And I recruited all three of those quite heavily, and that was kind of my approach, that I wanted people who were interested in being ministered to. I wanted to be a missionary. I wanted our players to be missionaries, and I wanted people who were seeking to find more depth in their life, and that's what I got to do in the context of basketball.
Yeah.
And one of the guys I got to coach was your brother Johnny.
Oh yeah,
and what a privilege! Yeah, good. I can't wait.
You were known. In fact, I know this firsthand because I played intramural, I think, a couple times against you, and you were tough. I mean, you were known as a tough, gritty competitor, as a player and as a coach. I used to sit across in the front row from you. Do you remember, by the way, do you remember our thing called the coaching staff?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, so for the viewers who don't know, we would, 10 of us, dress up like Coach Moore, suit and tie, and we would have clipboards, and we'd be in the front row directly across from the coach. And I was kind of the ringleader, probably.
No doubt.
I probably matured. I hope I matured since then, maybe a little. But I'd work the refs up and down the sideline. As coaches working the refs, we're over there working the refs back and forth. So that was
double team.
Yeah, we're double teaming the refs. And the refs kind of going, what are these guys? What are they doing? But you had this tough reputation. And I read something that you said in terms of, tough player, gritty, hard-nosed, and then you brought the Princeton offense, which was a revolutionary thing for Westmont and changed, I think, everything from my perspective as I saw that come into play, which is incredible to watch. But you said something. You said you don't have a philosophy of coaching until you get to 15 years as a head coach. You said, I discounted that idea originally, but then at that point in the 15-year range, I realized that I had a philosophy of coaching that makes it more meaningful and more meaningful for my players. What is that philosophy?
Yeah.
How would you describe that?
Well, I'm going to go back to something you said earlier. When you say tough, gritty about a player, that usually means they're unskilled. And so that's what I was. I was tough and I was gritty because I was less skilled than the next guy. No, I know you didn't, but I know what the back end meaning of that is. At least for me it was. And I was just fortunate enough to play for great coaches. I want to go back to my Cyprus coach. He was John Wooden's first All-American. And so there was a connection to John Wooden through Don Johnson. And Don Johnson was one of my favorite men in the world, and I was one of his favorites as well. He just passed away about 1.5 years ago, and I got to speak at his memorial, and that was an incredible privilege. And then you go from Don Johnson, John Wooden and Don Johnson, to Chet Kammerer. I couldn't have had two better college coaches than the two that I had. Wow. And Chet cared deeply for my soul, and Don cared for me as a person. And he was a Renaissance man, Don was. And Chet was just born and bred Indiana Hoosier with goodness deep in his heart. And he wanted me to experience his Savior. And he prayed me into a space where he was able to kind of encourage me to look at the kingdom in a little deeper way than I ever had. And so that was the difference maker. Back to your question about philosophy. I haven't forgotten. So my philosophy in that first 15 years, or first 10 years at Westmont, I was 5 years elsewhere at Fresno Pacific. My philosophy was we want to play an aggressive brand of basketball. We want to play aggressive defensively, we want to play aggressive offensively, and then we talk a lot about that. But now my philosophy comes down to one sentence. And I think it says everything about what Westmont was about, at least when I was there, trying to be about. We want every single basket to come via the assist. And that you've never seen. You've never seen a box score. High school, college, NBA, where every single basket has come via the assist. About 4 or 5 years ago, we had 50 baskets in a game. We had 44 assists.
Really?
88% of the baskets came via the assist. When we lost the national championship game in 2015, we had one game where we were within 3 or 4 of assists to total baskets. And what that means is you're sharing the ball. You're really kind of sharing the ball in a way where everybody gets credit. And so our guys get giddy on the bench when they see a guy passing the ball to another guy for a basket. They jump up and down, not for the dunk, but for the extra pass or the pass that leads to a basket. And I think that's symbolic of how best to lead in a family situation, in raising kids. If you have the ball being passed, then you're sharing it, and you have a chance to not be egotistical. And you mentioned a word earlier, I think maybe it was before it was John Davies said this earlier about listening. You know, listening is about passing. Because listening is you have to kind of open up your ears to what the other person has to say. In passing, you have to be more interested in what the other person can do than what you do alone. And you get a little bit of credit with an assist, but you don't get the same kind of accolades that you do with a basket. And so I love the pass. I love what the pass means. And so our philosophy is we want every single basket to come via the assist. And if you have that mentality as a framework, then your culture changes pretty dramatically.
Yeah. That's amazing. That's interesting. And I happen to know you had 422 assists, ranked number 4 all time, and you did it in 2 seasons. So you passed the ball a fair amount.
Like I said, because I couldn't shoot the ball, I had to pass the ball. I had to
See,
find a way to be important. Yeah.
See, as a basketball player, I was short, but I was slow. So I had the lateral mobility of an oak tree. So that didn't really work out for me, but I digress. Coach, if you were talking to, and you're on the national board with John Calipari and all these heavy hitters, but I guess one of my thoughts this morning was, if you were talking to a young coach or somebody who was interested in coaching and felt like that was part of their gifting, what is the opportunity for a coach? What is the biggest opportunity for a coach?
So I speak at these events, and I'll be talking about whatever the topic may be, and there's always a young kid coach in the crowd, and he'll raise his hand at halfway through maybe and say, "Coach, how come they're not built the way we were in our time?" And this guy's 25 and I'm, a little bit older. And I said, "What do you mean by that?" And he goes, "Well, they just don't do the kinds of things that we did." And I said, "Well, here's a message for you. You're not going to like hearing what I'm about to tell you. If they're not like how you want them to be, that's not on them. That is on you." So you have to find a way to teach and to coach and to bring them along to the space that they need to get to. And we've never been at a perfect place. We'll never get to a perfect place. But we are further and closer to that perfect place than we ever have been because of parents, because of coaches, and because of teachers we've had. So I say back to that young coach, your work is yet to be done. So make sure that so I was on a call earlier today with a bunch of younger coaches, and a Zoom call, and they were talking back and forth, and I didn't say a word until one of the coaches said, "Well, let's hear from Coach Moore." And they were talking about connectedness. And he said the best way to be connected to others is to be more about listening than about talking. And that is all about humility. My favorite chapter in that book you spoke about earlier, Mere Christianity, is this chapter number 8 on humility. And if you can only read one chapter in Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, read that chapter, because it will take you to your knees, and it'll take you to a place where you realize how important it is to understand others than thinking about what it is to be understood by somebody else. So I just seek out ways in which I can listen more effectively and be a little bit more understanding of others. And I think that's what I would suggest to a young coach. Make it more about them than it is about you.
That's good. That's so good. I'm going to ask you about a bunch of different people, but I wanted to ask you about one kind of a rival coach, Dave Holmquist, who I thought it was really honoring what he said about you when you retired. He said, he quoted Bear Bryant, I think, but he said, "Coach Moore's the kind of guy, he can take his players and beat yours, or he can take your players and beat his." I thought that's a pretty high honor. You had a lot of battles with Dave Holmquist over the years. What was that like? and Bill O'Dell, and I know there's been a lot of coaches that have kind of been around a long time. And what are those relationships like? I'm curious.
Well, let's go to Dave Holmquist to start with. And what you don't know is Dave recruited me.
Oh, he did?
So he was at Fresno Pacific. I was at, I wasn't anywhere. I was at Cypress College. And he was a Cypress College guy. So he played for Don Johnson as well. So we had a really strong connection. And the day I called Chet first to let him know I was coming to Westmont, because I knew if I had tried to call Dave first, he would try to convince me otherwise. So I called Chet, and then I called Dave, and I teared up. In fact, I probably more than just teared up. I cried when I told Dave that I wasn't coming to play for him. So he's been a friend for 40-some years.
Wow.
And we've had a great rivalry, but more importantly, we have an incredible amount of respect for one another. And I bet if you were to kind of check our records against one another, I bet it's almost 500.
Yeah, right.
I bet if you were to kind of look back at that, I bet we're right there, 500 against one another. And Dave's 8 wins away from 1,000. He's 8 wins away from 1,000 victories, and he's one of the finest coaches, but he's also one of the greatest men I've ever been around.
That's
and so
great.
Dear friend, was recruited by him, but also a guy who just, I think he's got 2 PhDs, maybe a third. He's got 3 or 4 master's degrees. Just an incredible Renaissance man in a really important way. And we talk, 2 or 3 times a week.
Do you really?
Still, yeah.
He says you're the greatest coach he ever coached against, which is a high compliment from him. I saw him at Vaughn's like 6 months ago.
Okay.
And I've never met him, but I'm just looking at it. He probably wondered if I was stalking him or what. I'm like, I think that's Dave Holmquist. So you must feel like you won the lottery in terms of Don Johnson, Dave Holmquist, Chet Kammerer. Of course, you married into the Lavin family.
Yeah.
I mean, you've had quite a circle. Yeah. That's probably had a big impact on you, just all these Cap Lavin and all these people that have been in your life, basketball people, but deep character people, amazing people. Yeah. Would you say?
Well, you mentioned my father-in-law, Cap. And Cap he's the epitome of, that Dos Equis commercial, the most interesting man in the world?
Right.
They got it wrong. It wasn't him, it was Cap Lavin. And Cap Lavin was, the first guy invited by the Harlem, maybe the only guy in that era, invited by the Harlem Globetrotters to be a part of their team. Not the Washington Generals, but the Harlem Globetrotters.
Really?
And, here's this guy being invited in the 50s, and that tells you the kind of ability he had to play the game of basketball. And he was a Hall of Famer in San Francisco, Hall of Famer at USF. Could have played professionally, but back in the early 50s, playing professionally wasn't what it is today in the NBA. And Cap's just one of the all-time greats. But the greatest coach I've ever been coached by is my wife. Not even close. Not even close. As good as Don was, as good as Chet was, as good as Dave Holmquist is, as good as Cap Lavin is, my wife is the greatest coach I've ever been around.
That is wonderful.
And she was the eldest of 6 kids, and Steve Lavin's the youngest of 6, so she had to coach Steve, and she had to coach her siblings, and she then got stuck with coaching somebody even harder than her siblings, and that's me. And she coaches me up every single day, even today. She gave me a haircut before I came. I hadn't had a haircut in 10 weeks, and so I was more presentable for the Dean Wilson Show. I know it's not the Dean Wilson Show, but I call it the Dean Wilson Show. And so, yes, I did hit the lottery. And I hit the lottery when I walked down the aisle, and I got a chance to see my wife walk towards me. And 30 years of marriage as of September 15th, and greatest coach I've ever known.
Oh, that's wonderful. What is your vision, or what is your thought process? I know this transition's happening with you and stepping out of the head coaching, which is going to be weird for me, among others, but we're trying to get over it. What is your vision as you think about the next 10 years and Westmont, your family? I know you have 2 wonderful daughters. What does it look like? Not that you have it all planned out, but what is your vision for this season, next season?
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked. I am so glad you asked. God has something planned for me. So the head of the NABC board is a guy named Jim Haney. and Jim Haney was the head coach at Oregon, and he's been the president, the executive director of the NABC for the last 20 years or so. Great man, a little over 20 years, I think it is. And so when I was preparing to make the announcement, I gave Jim a call on the phone. And he said, John, I woke up this morning early knowing I was going to have this 10 o'clock call with you. And God just kept speaking to me. And here's what he said. And Jim said about 10 things in a row. And after each one, saith the Lord, saith the Lord, saith the Lord. 10 straight times. And then he goes, and here's the last important message, really important message for you, John. Do not run into anything. Wait. And that's what I've been doing for the last 10 weeks. And I'm going to be waiting for a good while longer, because I think there is something in store, something yet to be done, something God that has for me that he's going to put out to me on a platter.
Yep.
And we'll find out what that is.
Yeah.
But it is something that I would not have been allowed to do if I'd still been coaching for the next few years. And so I know that there is something in store, and I can't wait to see what it is.
I can't wait to see it either. Yeah. You're an incredible writer. So I don't know if that's on the list, but I think you should write. Yeah. Every time I get one, I responded back to you. You never respond back to me when I respond back to you, by the way. Kind of offended by that. But,
I'm sorry.
But the letter you sent out to the coaches circle after your announcement was so powerful. So I don't know if the Lord has writing in store, but I'd read it.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I think there may be some possibilities there. And I, on that last coaches circle, I don't think I've responded to anyone, Dean. So you're in good company. You're in good company. It's been last 10 weeks have been a time in which I've been celebrated by a lot of people, and what you wrote to me was just so sweet to get that from you. But it's a little bit like too much cake.
Right.
Too much ice cream, too much celebration. You start to wonder whether that's really you they're talking about. And so I think you have to be careful, and I haven't responded to quite a number of people just because I'm taking it in, and I'm going to find a time in which to do that in the most present of ways and the most sincere of ways as well. And I do love writing. My mom was a great writer. Cappy Lavin was a great writer. My daughter, Jessie, is an unbelievable writer. She'll write a book before I will because she's gifted in that way. And I have a daughter by the name of Jacqueline who's a great speaker. And so I've got a great writer in one, I've got a great speaker in another. Back to the man who is Dos Equis commercial, but it's really Cap Lavin. There are interesting people in the world, Dean, and those are the great storytellers. There are interested people in the world that are the great listeners. Very few people are both. But Cap Lavin is one.
Wow.
He's a great storyteller, he was a great listener. My daughter Jacqueline is a great storyteller. She's a great listener. Steve Lavin was a great storyteller, is a great storyteller, and is a great listener. And that's why he's the best. If he gets back into Division I coaching, almost every year he's the top recruiter. The number one recruiting class in the year is Steve Lavin's. He is very, very gifted.
Wow. What a family. So that's wonderful. I want to close with, we only have a few minutes, but I'm going to just give you a name. This will be a little lightning round. I'll give you a name and give me a few sentences or whatever about the person. Some of these are former players. Some of them are other categories. Brian Gomes.
Maybe best ever. Yeah. And today a dear friend. We just texted back and forth. A couple days ago I sent him a picture of my daughter making me lunch, and his son is Drew, and his daughter is, I'll think of her name, Camille, and she goes by Mimi, I think, or Mealy, I think is what he calls her. And he said, I got to teach them how to make me lunch.
So you sent him a picture?
I sent him a picture of Jacqueline making me lunch, and he goes, I got to get my 5- and 7-year-old or 4- and 6-year-old or whatever they
trained.
So it's a little early.
Daniel Carlin.
Well, I just got a text this morning from Daniel, and the sad story about Daniel is that I think we would have won a national championship if Daniel had been healthy for that last game. And Daniel and I sat in the hospital together after we lost that game, And it was such a tenuous circumstance, and that's our memory. That's one of our fondest memories, is sitting in the hospital together, helping him get to the other side.
Wow.
And he's another very dear friend of mine today.
Chris Clark.
Gosh, you're picking out some great ones. Chris, I would say what I love most about Chris is how much he grew up during the time.
Mm-hmm.
He came in with a group of guys who had been freshmen together. Adrian Phillips, Mitch Pierce, Ryan Tillery, Will Gully. Those are all guys who came in together. And Chris came in as a sophomore. But he acclimated to those guys. That's one of the tightest group of players I've ever had, and it's because those other four guys really welcomed Chris well, and then Chris just kind of fit in well. One of the greatest scorers I've ever had. He was a big time.
What about Adrian Phillips?
AP was
all-time steals leader.
Yeah, all-time steals leader. But AP was an unbelievable leader right away. He was a great leader as a freshman, and then just got better each year along the way, and so it culminated with a phenomenal career. 3 out of 4 years they made it to the national tournament. Probably the best game Westmont's ever played at the national tournament was AP's junior year, and we beat a team that was quite good, and Adrian had a phenomenal game, and so did Mitch and Till and Will Gully as well. But
wow.
Yeah.
Joe Kearns.
Yeah, Joe. Well, we share something, which is we're lefties.
Right.
And I had really long hair,
right.
And he had really long hair. And no, Joe's one of my all-time favorites just because he cared so much, and he was a great defender. He talked about getting into people's grills, and then since then, I think what Joe cares so much about is the families of the people who work for him.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to get him more involved in some things we were doing in Westmont basketball, and he said, "I'll only do it if I can continue to support all the families that it can't get in the way of my job, because my priority is to make sure that there's food on the table and that the people who work for me can be as successful as possible." That's
so great.
Everything in the world about Joe to me.
So wonderful. Dr. David Winter.
Oh gosh. He's my president. He's my president. He's a president that I came to Westmont with. He's a president that I got a chance to come back to Westmont with. He called me on the phone. I was in the kitchen. Rachel picked the phone up back in the day when there were things called a landline. And Rachel handed me the phone. It's Dr. Winter. And he said to me, "I want to offer you the job back at Westmont." And I'll remember where I was in Hieronymus Lounge when I came back, and they did a huge press conference. And I remember exactly where David was and what he said to me to make me feel as though I was coming back to the greatest job ever. And I was. And that springtime, as I came back, I was driving between Fresno and Westmont. I was staying on campus, and I would walk through the formal gardens, and I would pray this prayer: "Never allow me to take this for granted." And I continue to pray that even on this day, in these days. But I always will go by the statue of David and Helene, and I'll put my hand on one of their shoulders and put my other hand on the other shoulder, just because I'm so devoted to and committed to their standards of what they brought to Westmont. Helene and Dave is who I'm talking about, and Helene to this day is one of my favorite people in this town, and so it's not just David, it's David and Helene, and Helene and David.
That's wonderful. My little brother Johnny.
Yeah.
He's not little anymore. My big brother, younger brother.
Yeah.
What was he like?
Well, what Johnny did, I knew Johnny when he was, well, you would bring Johnny to early morning hoops.
Right.
And for those who don't know, Dean and I used to play 6 a.m. basketball together. And then Dean brought Johnny. And Johnny was 12, 13, somewhere in there, 12, 13, 14. And he was about as confident a 12-year-old amongst men, playing amongst men. And that's who Johnny is. I think Johnny's a very confident young man. And he was confident as a player, but he was more confident as a leader. And I think Johnny became captain his senior year because of the leader that he is. And we were really good. his senior year, and we went to the national tournament his senior year. Hadn't been for a few years before that. And so Johnny and Sant and that group of guys, they took us to the national tournament, but it was Johnny's leadership that really made us the kind of team that we were.
I love it. Jeff Hazen.
The best. Yeah. He's the best. He and I have been together for 27 years. Jeff could have been a head coach 10 times over. In fact, if he had stepped into my role, he would have done it better than I did. And I'm not being falsely humble. I really, really believe that to be true, which tells you the kind of sacrifice he was willing to make for all those years. And he's just the best. And he's the best in so many different ways. I mean, he was an assistant under Chet Kammerer, was an assistant under Jeff Crosby, was an assistant under me for 27 years. He's going to continue on with Landon Boucher. You know, I can talk all I want about humility. Jeff Hazen lives it out. Wow. He lives it out in how willing he is to serve and how loyal he is to Westmont basketball and how wanting he is for players to have the best experience possible.
Yeah.
And if I had a little more time, I'd tell a story that Johnny told about Jeff. In fact, I'm going to take a little more time.
Go ahead.
Johnny said when he came in as a freshman, all the seniors were just bragging about Ace. And he said, sophomore year, freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, he said, what's the big deal about A's? What's the big deal about A's? Then he got to his senior year, and he realized A's was waiting. He wasn't allowing people to have a piece of himself until they had paid their dues. And by the time Johnny got to his senior year, he had paid his dues. And he realized how valuable it was to have a piece of A's. Wow. Because A's had saved himself for when Johnny finally earned the right to have a piece of Jeff Hazen.
Oh, that's
and so A's is loyal to the hilt, and I think Johnny knows what that means, and I think we all know what that means, but the best. He's the best.
Well, we got to close. We're out of time, but I want to encourage people who are watching, since it's not a surprise, but we're going to honor Coach Moore at our December event, Legacy of Service event, the Rosewood Miramar on December 15th. We've got a couple other names coming that we're going to announce, but we thought of you, Coach, and you've had an impact on the community, in these players' lives that goes on and on. Just a guy like me was just a random student, but I just always liked you, loved you, looked up to you. I feel like you're pastoral in a sense in the community. I feel like you're just wonderful. So I just want to honor you. Thank you for your years, and I look forward to seeing what's next and what God shows you. So thanks for coming on.
Well, this has been an honor to be with you and to receive that award. I love this city. I love the Turner Foundation. I love what you did on the west side, and I'd go over there and visit you on the west side. And I love Westmont. I love our college, and it is our college because we share it in the same. It's our alma mater, and so I think the best is yet to come, Dean.
Yeah.
The best is yet to come for Westmont. The best is yet to come for Westmont basketball. Can't wait to see what Landon does in the way of the cupboard is full, and I can't wait to see what next year brings for him and for Rob and for A's. But I think the best is yet to come for me as well, and I can't wait to see what God has in store for me. And,
I believe that.
But what a privilege it is to be here, and thanks for allowing me to spend some time with you in this wonderful backyard.
Yeah, great. Thanks, John. Appreciate it. We'll see you next time.